When you get to be 100 years old, you have to be careful when you get up. Be sure you're going to stay up.
Especially with all them wires up there, Cail.
Kind of intimidating.
Yeah.
When I walked in a while ago, Phil said, "You're teaching today?" I said, "Yeah, but we could just turn out and go to Jimmy's. Everybody'd be a lot happier. So you want to vote about it, or shall we go ahead and..." Anyway, here we are. As you all know, I'm noted for storytelling, so if you don't mind, I'm going to tell a couple to get it started. First is a personal story about Galatians. In 1961, somehow some madness attacked me, and I decided that I needed to enroll at the Southwestern Seminary at Fort Worth. I didn't know at that time that I was not a seminary kind of person, but I found out pretty soon. And I took Greek. I'd had a whole lot of Greek already, and I thought I was really cutting big mustard doing all that. And what we did in that Greek class was to study the book of Galatians. We were responsible for every word in Galatians, to be able to parse it and say everything about it. On the final exam, I made 98.5 out of 100 and got a B. I was through with that guy. That wasn't about anything except a watermelon seed spitting contest. The other story was my golf pro friend at Waco, ran the driving range there, and spent more time with him than anybody else while we lived at Waco. He was a muscle man. He had been a running back in college, a good deal older than me. And he got older yet, that's all it was tend to do. And he got diabetes. And he came to see me to talk about it because I'd had it a long time already, and he figured I'd had some wisdom about it. And after we talked for a while, he finally stormed at me one day, "Just tell me what I can eat." He had already done that at his doctor. Now, that's not very complicated. The answer is you can eat anything, but you have to manage it to keep your sugar. Now, I said that to talk about our problem in Galatians, and that is this thing of resorting back to legalism. Instead of being set free to do what we want to do and what Jesus wants us to do, we like to live by rules, have these lists that we keep and all that, and that's what he was looking for. And I say all that to get me started today. Why is it that this was a problem in the Galatian churches? Why had they gone back to slavery, which we've talked about on the one hand, and why is that a problem now? Let me set that up. My first job at Oklahoma Christian was a recruiter. I was a student recruiter, director of admissions, as they called me, which was a good title for traveling around trying to get kids to go to OCC. I knew people in churches everywhere. I felt like I was in touch with what was going on in churches in Oklahoma and Texas, other places. And then I went to Baylor for the 3.5 years, and when I came back to Oklahoma City, I discovered that a document had showed up in various churches listing things that you could and could not do if you were going to be a deacon or an elder or teach a Sunday school class. Now, right off the bat, I became the interim minister for the village church. They had a big bad blow up and asked me to be their preacher for a while. Yeah, I'll do that. And I told the elders the first day, I'll do this job if you will agree with me that what we're going to do to solve that problem is get to work. The problem for problems with churches, the solution for problems with churches is to be doing your business, to be doing what you ought to be doing. Yeah, we're going to do that. Somebody brought to an elders meeting that document. Somehow or other, they had done that thing and were having people sign it if they were going to be an elder, or a deacon, or teach a Sunday school class or whatever. I said, oh, ho, hang on. No. I grew up in the Church of Christ from the time I was 0. My mama took me to church, to those meetings outside and all that when I was 0. And we don't do that creed business. No. But this is not creed. Oh, yes, it is. It is a creed. So let's ask this question. Do y'all want me to be your preacher? Well, yeah, that's fine. Then, okay, then get rid of that because I'm not signing that. And I'm not going to advise anybody else to sign it. Because what that is a resort to legalism. It's making lists and rules and stuff to live by, and we're not going to do that. Our lesson today is Galatians 3, verse 23. Let me read if I can see. I better put on some specs. Now, before faith came, we were confined under the law, kept under restraint until faith should be revealed. So that the law was our custodian until Christ came, that we might be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer under a custodian, for in Christ Jesus you are all sons of God through faith. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise. We'll stop there and work a while, and then we'll read some more. Before faith came, you all excuse me for doing what I'm about to do because I'm going to be telling you stuff you already know, but it needs to be said in this context. Faith. Before faith came. What is that? I mean, there's always been faith. Now, what we're going to do here is a language lesson. The word faith, in one form or another, appears over 500 times in the Bible. 500 references. There are at least 26 different meanings to the word faith. Now, what people like to do is, look, what does the word mean? I don't want a whole lot of gobbledygook about it, but think about all of our language. We always try to communicate well. So when we listen to somebody, we want to know what they mean by what they say. When my wife and I talk about this, we always use the word fix. I'm fixing to fix up and go get a fix, and then I'm going to fix supper, and I'm going to fix this deal on the wall here, and that's liable to get me in a fix. What in the world does the word fix mean? It means what you mean by it at that time. Now, the real document of Paul about faith, besides Galatians, of course, is Romans. I don't know how many times I've taught Romans about the city. And I worked pretty hard in my own mind to figure out what Paul meant by faith in Romans and here. I think I got it right, but whether I did, anyway, I'm going to tell you. He does not mean mental assent. That's one of the meanings of faith. Do you believe in New York City? Yeah. I think it's there. Well, okay. If you did now, you're going now. So I agree. I agree that New York City's there. There's not much to that. That, of course, that's James about works and faith. The demons believe and shudder. And you think there's God? Yeah, we sure do. We know that, yeah. Scared me to death. So, is that helpful? No, not at all. I believe in Romans and here that Paul means 4 things by faith. Incidentally, it's a noun. It is a unit, a body of stuff and action. So let me list. First, mental assent. Obviously, believe in Christ. Do you believe that Christ is the Son of God? Yes, I do. Mental assent. Second is trust. Is there something about that, about Christ and what he said and did, that you can depend on, that got you back, that you're okay with it? Yes. Third is commitment. You going to do anything about that? Been my great privilege over the years to work with lots of people who have been married a long time. Judy and I were talking about that today. It's 58 years for us, and there's some that are way longer than that. I tried hard to get it out here, but took me, she wouldn't agree for a good long while. I had to do some serious talking. Commitment, and finally, obedience. When you put those four things together, that's what Paul means by faith in Romans and here. So the reaction to that on the part of some is, you're not talking about faith, you're talking about works. No, no, no. All that stuff goes together. God does the grace part. That's God's part. Our part is faith. It is our yes to God's, let me give you this. Yes, I want that. I accept that. Count me in. I'm all for that. I believe that is his take on faith in Romans and here. So that solves the problem of put your hand on the radio and you're going to be saved. What? What you're going to do is you feel a little warmth, and if there's a wire there, you're going to get shocked. No. That's not that. That is a form of faith, yes, mental assent. But faith is much bigger than that. I hate to say, I hate to quote this particular prophet because this sounds kind of illegal. Christianity is a grace faith system. God's part, our part. That's what he's talking about. So before faith came, we were under a custodian. That's the RSV version of that. I don't particularly like that word. The word is child tender. The child tender did everything for a child except the final teaching. They looked after them, they took care of them, they got them there, they taught them what to do and all that. The word that I like best is from the American Standard Version, tutor. So the purpose of the law was to take care of us, get us headed the right direction until we got faith. Until we had this faith that showed up and was available to us. Let's talk about Paul and law for a minute. We know that Paul was highly educated. There was one commentator that I read years ago that said, he may have studied everything in the world there was to study at that time. Language, philosophy, physics, math, everything else. And when you study Romans, it's easy to get bogged down in what Paul means when he talks about law and the law. People that I have talked to about law and Paul say that his creativity in Romans about the law, Moses, and law in general is extremely up to date and very informed. And there are others who say that some of his stuff is a little bit off the wall. Well, I don't know about that. But there it is. This prophet that gave me a vision preach, Baylor, loved to harp on Paul being mad as a hornet when he wrote Galatians. And he was chapped. And at the end of our deal today, he's going to get real cynical. He's going to be sarcastic. We'll have fun doing that part. But he said, because being trying to go back into the law, being under a curse, which is pretty drastic. I want to complicate that a little by going to Acts 21. Now he's done his preaching tours, and he goes to Jerusalem and gets in all kinds of trouble. They assume things about him that were not right. They thought he could program us into the temple and all that. And they say to him, look, the rumor is around that what you've been doing is preaching against the law and teaching people that the children don't have to be circumcised and you don't have to do all that. We need to do something to straighten that out. We need to get things right. Let me get my glasses here. You can do a little reading. And they said to him, you see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed. They are zealous for the law, and they have been told about you, etc. When we talk about the Judaizing teachers, why we think about that being just a few. But think about this. The whole Christian business came from the Jewish culture. Jesus was a Jew, etc. And there are thousands of believers who still practice that stuff. Still, I mean, it was their national law system. It was their culture and all that. And so what they decided to do about that is we've got 4 guys that have made vows. And so what we want to get you to do is to go and join with them and pay their offering and validate what they're doing. When I read that then years ago and when I read it now, I go, the book of Galatians is classed as one of Paul's anti-Judaic epistles, if you're interested in scholarly language about that, as is the book of Romans. He has eschatological epistles, 1st, 2nd Thessalonians. He has anti-Judaic epistles. And in Galatians, he's just furious at them about going back to the law. And there he is doing that stuff. Now that puts me to really thinking, well, what was that about? What was he doing? If he was that hard against the law, why was he doing it? And then we talked about the Jerusalem conference. What are we going to do to be sure that the Gentiles are accepted by the Jews, all Christians? We're going to send them this letter to say these 4 things. We want y'all not to be doing that. I need to say if I'd have been at that meeting, I'd have had to say, guys, that sounds like Jewish stuff to me. That sounds to me like you're trying to get people to do Jewish stuff. On the other hand, then there's this, where he's so mad about it, and scolds and all that. You want me to resolve that for you, don't you? Let me try it this way. One commentator that I read sometime in the distant past said that Christianity historically, from the beginning for many years, divides nicely into 2 kinds. And we get a little squeamish about that. First is Palestinian Christianity. That's what went on in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and resulted in thousands of people let's do that number for just a second. In Acts 6, when they had that problem over the daily distribution of food, and they appointed those deacons to look after that, the estimate is that there were 25,000 Christians in Jerusalem at that time. So we're talking a lot of people doing a lot of stuff, and that's what it's saying here. And in that Jerusalem conference, thus advised the Gentiles to do this. That's a little hard to resolve. On the one hand, going back to that law is bad stuff. On the other hand, there it is. That's what it is. By way of talking scholarship, the second element of Christianity, there's the Palestinian stuff. And then as time went by, it became more Hellenistic. We've said many times that all the culture everywhere at that time was Hellenistic. So everybody spoke Greek. For the simple reason that that first of all, they had done a lot of conquest, and then they got conquered, and the Romans caused them to be slaves and teachers and masons. So Greek became the language everywhere. That's the Hellenistic. And Bible scholars like to trace the changes that happened as Christianity moved away from the Palestinian into the whole, well, of course, that's Galatians and etc. That has happened, that happened then and happens now. The thesis that almost every serious Bible student will take is that Christianity, or any other religion, tends to adapt itself to the culture where it is. The flavor, the ethics, the habits, your part of the world is what you know, and that has a tremendous impact on any religion, Christianity or any other. One of the results of that is called ethnocentrism, if you're interested in that word. Ethnocentrism means that I value what I know and devalue what I don't know. My dog can whoop your dog. My dad can throw a football further than yours. My recipes are better than yours. While we're talking about that, y'all know I like to cook. And when I pick up a magazine or something to look at their recipes, I get mad. Put 3 ounces of baker's sugar and 6, what? They talk about stuff I never heard of. They don't know how to cook. Well, we're saying, I mean, there we are. We like what we know, and we don't necessarily like what we don't know. And when you look at a culture, when you look at a religion, you can tell stuff that they got from their culture. Sociologists, psychologists love to do that and tell us about ourselves. This was probably 30 years ago. The elders at Cail, where I was going and employed at the time, part-time, hired a sociologist from Houston to study us and tell us about ourselves. By way of notice, at that time, I was teaching a class at OC. He never found me. Which I found a little ironic. He told us stuff about ourselves. The one that was the most interesting was, your attrition rate is 45%, which means we turned over people at a rapid rate. people came and went at a rate of 45% a year. He told us a lot of other things about ourselves. Some he got right, some he didn't. But you can trace, biblically, the change in the language, the terms, and all that from the Palestinian era to the Hellenistic era. Well, Paul was caught right between those. And how many times have we read, he goes into a town, he goes to the synagogue, he talks, does his preaching, they all get mad at him, run him out, so he turns to the Gentiles. That was the Pauline story. And he had to deal with that, and there he is dealing with it. In our stuff in Galatians, he's mad as a hornet. Let me see where I got to here. What word did they use for custodian there in the NIV?
Guardian.
Guardian. Yeah, that's a good one.
RSV uses disciplinarian.
Disciplinary. And it's just, as I said, the American Standard uses tutor, which I like. Let's read a little more.
James, the old NIV uses supervision.
Supervision?
Supervision, and then it has a footnote that says, in the Greek, it means child discipliner.
Yeah. Well, in the when you're 100 years old trying to think of things, the Greek lexicon used the term child tender, and we did this great long explanation about it, where they did everything except the actual final teaching. Okay. Galatians 4. I mean that the heir, as long as he is a child, is no better than a slave, though he is the owner of all these things. But he is under guardians and trustees until the date set by the Father. So with us, when we were children, we were slaves to the elemental spirits of the universe. But when the time had fully come, Christ sent forth his Son, born of woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So through God, you are no longer a slave, but a son, and if a son, then an heir. Formerly, you did not know God, you were in bondage to beings that by nature are no gods, but now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how can you turn back again to the weak and beggarly elemental spirits, whose slaves you want to be once more? You observe days and months and seasons of years. I am afraid I have labored over you in vain. I don't think Paul knew what was about to happen. And when we study it now, what has happened in 2,000 years is a multiplication of systems. Somebody has an idea to explain the Christian faith, and so they formulate a body of data and behavior to promote that. What people ought to believe and what they ought to do. I jotted down a few here, if you'll permit me to read from my notes. some of the systems. Of course, there's Judaism, which we've done. Gnosticism. That's about to happen shortly after this time. This was a body of doctrine that ranked people by their worth and how smart they were. And if you got really great and really good, you got to be a knower. You were at the top level. Well, that didn't work. There was libertinism. Well, we've been set free. We're not under the rule of a list of laws anymore, which means we can do whatever we want to. And that's what people did when they believed that. That's how they acted. Monasticism. Christ came not to encourage people to sin, but to do the right thing and to live strictly. You ought to be really, really careful what you eat, what you touch, what you think, what you do. And the best way to do that is to all get together and go live somewhere where you're not tempted to do bad stuff. Monasticism. That wasn't worth much. Pietism. This was an approach that said every part of your life should be Christian works, Christian stuff. Luther said that the woman who is mopping the floor is as much a priest as a priest. I've mopped the floor, and somehow I don't think I was doing anything Christian when I was mopping the floor. So, if you farm, you can't use machinery, you got to use horses, and you can't have any electricity. What is there about that makes sense? Those people do some real good cooking and make some real good furniture, but I don't know whether that has anything to do with Christianity or not. It has to do with making the good food and making furniture. Calvin and Lutheranism, the prevailing methodology as far as systems are concerned came from Luther and Calvin. And what they did was to emphasize God's work, and everything they believed and promoted was done by God, and what man does doesn't matter, that it doesn't depend on you. What the theologians now say about Calvin was this: when he was 26 years old, he wrote his work, The Institutes of the Christian Religion, that God does everything. It's predetermined, and God does it, and you can't resist it, and then you can't lose it. What that does is to say, it doesn't matter what you do. Now, we all know better than that. It does matter what you do. It matters what you think and what you do. There have been millions and millions following that system. And they are the ones who got to the point that mere mental assent is salvation, because that's just God working on you. I'll tell another seminary story, if you don't mind. In this class, there were 85 Baptist preachers and me. They knew that I was the preacher at a small town 40 miles from there and loved to pick at me. When anything got said, they always looked over at me. And this young man addressed the class one day and said, I had a conversation this week with the Church of Christ guy, and he said something to me that I want to tell you about, see what you think, okay? He said, can you sin after you're saved? Yeah, you can sin. Well, does that not cause you to? Well, no, because God won't let you die while you're in that state. What did he say then? He said, I've got a deal for you. Get drunk and stay drunk and you'll never die. 85 guys looked at me. The prof said to him, what did you tell him? I didn't know what to tell him. He said, I don't either. And we went on. And what number 185 was sitting there going, it does matter. That's just nonsense. In my counseling work, dealing with people who were parents, they wanted to know why something wasn't working. And if I could see why, which I usually could because it wasn't that complicated, I could say to them, don't do that, do this. Maybe one more story. There was a lady who was a single mother. She had a daughter who was about 8. And she had a job so that she had to leave the house at 7:30. She could not leave the house 1 minute later than that, or she couldn't get to work. And her daughter had to catch the bus, and she couldn't get her done. She just wouldn't get up and get her clothes on and fix her hair and eat breakfast, and she couldn't go off and leave her. You just leave somebody out on the street. Can you help me with that? Oh yeah, I can help. We did what we call a token economy. Let's find out stuff that she likes. Come in with a list of everything that she really likes. We call it reinforcers. That's the stuff in life that we really like, and we'll see what we can do about that. So she brought in this was a real ambitious girl. So we arranged a system where she got points for doing what she did, and there were rewards, the little ones, and then the bigger ones, and then bigger ones. And the final one was she and 4 friends could go to Six Flags over Texas. Whoa! So we put that in place, and that girl was up and fixing her hair and always ready to go way before 7:30, and she always wanted a sale. You never heard of that, where somebody wants to buy stuff cheaper than it usually is? Can I get some points for doing thus and so? Yes. Could we go to Brahms after school? This is an example. This woman picks up this beautiful catalog of all this, and that girl became a merchant. She was an 8-year-old promoter. I said, I'd love to have that. Will you give me that catalog when we get through? She did. So I don't have it. But my job was to tell them, don't do that, do that. Because it matters what we do. Now the question is, are we working when we do the right thing, or are we having faith? Well, depends on baptism, for example. In Pauline language, being baptized into Christ is having faith. But there are lots of people who get baptized for other reasons. I've known lots of guys who got baptized so some girl would go with them. And what they got was wet. They got wet. That's what that was worth. Let me do some of these other systems. Modernism and fundamentalism. One of the topics that church historians work on is called the fundamentalist modernist debate that went on in the early part of the 20th century until 1950 or so. Fundamentalists are people that believe in the magic Bible. The Holy Spirit typed it, and every word perfect, and there it is. So you don't need to be studying, don't need to be taking any Greek or any language or any of that stuff. And the modernists were those that thought, nah, what we ought to be doing is not having church and worshiping and all that. We ought to be doing good works. We ought to be out helping people that need things. And that debate went on for all that time. Didn't solve much. there is the grandiosity movement. I've said in your presence, I know many times that Judy and I love, we love the UK. I think we went 42 times. And we went to big, beautiful, religious things, cathedrals, abbeys, etc., that were trash. Henry VIII, when he became head of the church in the 16th century, tore them down. But some of those places are still there. They've rebuilt them, and they're beautiful. But does that have anything to do with the Christian faith? Is that anything about how we ought to be together? What that is a beautiful building. Constitutionalism, that's us. The Calvinists, the Campbells, did not like what was happening in the churches that they were part of at the time, and so they said, what we need to do is to agree that we're going to use the Bible as our authority. We're going to try to find what the Bible says and do that. Well, that's a good thing as we see it. The only thing is, same problems that the country has with constitutionalism is which ones? I'll do one example. I grew up a teetotaler. Let me very quickly say that I was a teetotaler and still am. At first it was religious. Don't be drinking that because they got me in a plight. I'll tell a little short story about that. One of my ex-sweethearts in Texas called and said, will you come to Texas and marry me to my current sweetheart? Yeah, okay, yeah. I'd be wildly interested in doing that. Can't wait to do that. These were not rich people. They lived in a hut out in a cotton field, but they were pretty rich because the man collected gold coins and had lots of them. They rented a whole restaurant in Fort Worth. A whole restaurant for the rehearsal dinner. Now here I am in the midst of people. I live here by then. And they have wine glasses at the plate. Now I don't know what the rules are. If you don't want coffee, you turn the cup over. But turning that wine glass over didn't seem quite right to me. So I just sat there and left it, and they came and put wine in it. And I didn't drink it. And I look up in a minute, and everybody in there is looking at me. Yeah, I know it's paranoid. They weren't looking at me. They were. This is people that I have lived with for years and love. And we were close. I was 25 at that time, so I went ahead with the whole operation, but that really did something to me. Now I'm 85, and if that happened to me now, I would be in the car headed north, and they would wonder whatever happened to me. You people need to go jump in the lake. Well, I got older then, and got exposed to people with differing views, and then it dawned on me, that teetotaling deal that you hold to so firmly. Now that, from the shrink standpoint, being teetotal, that's a good thing. That's wisdom, but that's not a religious thing. Whether you drink any wine or not. That, and then somebody quoted to me that Jesus at Cana at that wedding made 180 gallons of the finest wine ever made. You might ought to change your mind about that. It's a little shocking when you discover that one of your pets is just that, just a pet. There's the old joke, of course, about the two guys debating about Jesus and him making that wine, and the one says to the other one, I'd have thought a lot more of him if you wouldn't have done it. C.S. Lewis says about that, it doesn't do any good to try to be better than God. I guess that's probably right. Well, but I'll do one more. I think we're about to run out of time. When I was in college, one of the things that we did was preacher boys would drive out somewhere to fill in preaching. The preacher was gone or whatever. So I went to this little church where some of my family lived, and took my Revised Standard Bible with me. I was studying Greek at that time, and my prof had just finished his doctorate at Duke, studied 26 versions of the New Testament, and concluded that the Revised Standard was the most accurate in translating the parts, the documents that we have of the New Testament. So I'm about to preach a sermon from the Revised Standard, and this guy gets up and says, the only Bible that's acceptable is the King James. That was just sheer ignorance. I mean, I didn't yell, or I probably should have. The King James is a perfectly good Bible, but it is the least accurate of all the extant versions. They did not have the oldest manuscript, and it is not the most accurate in any sense. Well, sometimes things just get away from me. And this hour got away from me. I like that time goes fast. I'll finish that stuff next week and we'll do a little more. Thank you all.